Started
This
then?
conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, we're good to go.
All right, welcome everyone to the Montachusett MPO meeting of October 16th. Brian, can you read the roll, please?
Steve Wolfel, representing Mass DOT Secretary and CEO Montachusett Nut.
Here.
Ann Sullivan, Mass DOT Highway, representing Jonathan Gulliver.
Here.
Mark Piamarini, Leominster.
Here.
Glenn Eaton, MRPC.
Here.
George Kahali, Mart.
Here.
And Tim Kilhart, Subregion 3.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum.
Do we have anyone from Federal Highway or Federal Transit on?
I do not see any ex officios on.
All right, I'm just trying to, I keep forgetting it, Brian, so I just wanted to make sure.
Right, I have it written down too. Thanks.
All right, so let's move on to the next agenda item, which I believe is public comment, correct? Are there any members of the public who'd like to address the MPO today? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 3, which are the minutes of September 18th. Can I get a motion, a second, to approve the minutes?
So moved, Ann Sullivan.
I second.
Thanks, George. Any comments, changes, questions on the minutes? Seeing none, Brian, you want to read the?
Steve Wolfel, Mass DOT.
Yes.
Ann Sullivan, Mass DOT Highway.
Yes.
Mark Piamarini, Leominster.
Yes.
Glenn Eaton, MRPC. See a thumbs up. George Kahali, Mart.
Yes.
Tim Kilhart, Subregion 3.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. With that, let's move on to the next agenda item, which I believe is agenda item 4, which is also a voting item. It's the single occupancy vehicle targets. And Chris, I believe you're handling this, correct?
Hey, Steve. Yes, this is me.
Right.
Okay. I did share a copy of this presentation with Brian, I think yesterday. Brian, would you be able to share your screen, or would you like me to take over?
I could make you the presenter.
Okay. Let me just pull it up really quick.
The other two are friends to have a GIS. Yeah, the orange ones.
So the non-SUV travel members are a part of our performance reporting initiative as required by FHWA. We have 5 metrics here, 3 of which are relevant for the entire. Oh, I know. I'm just ad-libbing. Sorry. The entire interstate, non-interstate NHS, and 2 that are subject to only specific urbanized areas. And Montachusett is a member of both the Boston urbanized area and the Worcester urbanized area.
Chris, are you sharing your screen? Are you sharing something?
I'm not. I'm still pulling up the presentation. Sorry, Ann.
Chris, I do have it here. If you want me to, I have it. I can share. Can you see that?
Sure. Would you mind, Brian?
Can you I'm hearing a lot of background noise.
Just being a little slow right now.
I'm hearing a lot of background noise. For people who aren't speaking, can you turn your mics off, please?
I think the problem is it's people in our office and Chris is in the office today. And so I think that's the problem, Grace, right? Chris, I'm guessing?
I'm probably. Brian, let me know whenever you're ready.
How's that?
I can see it. That's great. So apologies. Before I proceed, do you want me to present on all of the PM3 measures or just the non-SOV specific measures that we've proposed to adjust?
I think just the SOV would be sufficient because.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. In that case, you can proceed to the next slide. just want to start off with a little bit of background on these measures. So in 2016, the Federal Highway Administration passed a rule establishing 3 performance measures that state DOTs and MPOs need to track. These measures cover safety, PM1, pavement and bridge condition, PM2, and congestion, reliability, and emissions, that's PM3. And this is the mid-performance period, or the halfway mark of the 4-year performance period, in which FHWA requires an update to see how we're doing relative to the targets that we established 2 years ago. You go to the next slide, Brian. So this particular report was for just PM2 and PM3 measures, and it was due on October 1st. And so MassDOT successfully submitted that report, and the only target adjustments that have been made are those to the non-single occupancy vehicle category, since those are the only categories in which the data actually exceeded the targets that we established 2 years ago. You can go to the next slide, Brian. So this is just a little bit of background on the third performance measure. You can see the 5 metrics here. They cover reliability, which includes level of travel time reliability on both the interstate system and non-interstate national highway system, as well as truck travel time reliability on the interstate system, and those are both statewide measures. Moving on to congestion, these are relevant for our 3 urbanized areas, which have a population exceeding 200,000. So that is Springfield, Worcester, and Boston. And the 2 metrics relevant for just the urbanized areas are the percentage of non-SOV travel and the peak hour excessive delay, or PHED. And then that final measure at the bottom, emissions, is a calculation of total on-road mobile source emissions that we expect to be reduced from projects funded through our Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program, or CMAQ program. There's probably going to be a lot of slides between this and the non-SOV portion of the presentation. I apologize for that. I will come back and cover this at a future date, or your liaison, Derek Schuster, will cover these ones in the middle. Here we go, Brian. Thank you. So this is, again, this metric for the non-SOV travel is based on the percentage of people commuting to work using any mode other than a single occupancy vehicle. So that could be carpooling, public transit, walking, biking, or telecommuting. And as I mentioned earlier, this specific measure is only required to be reported on at the urbanized area level. And because Montachusett contains some NHS miles that are part of both the Boston and Worcester UZA, I will present this measure for both of those urbanized areas today. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of the data for the Boston urbanized area. So this is pulled from the U.S. Census Bureau's American Community Survey 5-year estimates on means of transportation to work. And the 5-year estimate means that the census combines 5 years of data to produce multi-year estimates. So in the column year 2022, for example, estimates for that year consider all of the data collected between January 1st, 2018 and December 31st, 2022 to provide a really accurate estimate. And I'll briefly highlight some of the trends and changes that you can see here. So moving from left to right, starting in 2016, you see where the numbers begin in terms of the populations that drove alone, carpooled, used public transit, and worked at home. And as you move right to 2022, you can see how these numbers really changed. So the drive alone rate dropped, the carpool dropped slightly, public transit dropped. It's sort of in response to the pandemic. And then the big difference here is that work from home, the bottom row, we see that moving from about 4.6% in 2016 to over 16% in 2022. So we attribute a lot of the changes here to that particular category. So before looking at our new target, I just wanted to take a quick look back at the old target. This is our trend line that we developed 2 years ago. Using ACS estimates, we created a trend line projection by finding the rate of change in non-SOV travel from 2014 to 2019. And although the 2020 estimates were available at that time, we did not want to include that year because it was heavily affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, and we didn't want it to have too much of an impact on our trendline projection. So from that estimate, we came to the following targets: a 2-year target of 38.77% non-SOV travel in the Boston urbanized area, and a 4-year target of 39.81% non-SOV travel. You go to the next slide, Brian. So this is the latest available data applied with the methodology from our last target setting 2 years ago. As you can see, the non-SOV travel rate, the latest available data in 2022 shows that we are at a rate of 41.36%. That has exceeded both our 2-year and 4-year target. So this is positive, but we know more than what the data tells us here, and that the dramatic rate of change we start to see in 2020 was really brought on by the pandemic, not simply behavioral changes in the way we commute. So if we were to employ the same methodology from 2 years ago using the latest data, we calculated a rate of change to be about 3 times greater than what we experienced during the pandemic. And that trend line projection would look what is like on the screen, approaching nearly 50%. And so this rate of change is clearly not sustainable in the long term. So we had to develop a new methodology. You go to the next slide, Brian. So in coordination with our planning colleagues, staff to the Boston MPO, we looked at the 1-year data for 2021 and 2022 to examine how non-SOV numbers were changing year to year after the start of the pandemic. And we found that there was a decrease in the 1-year rate of non-SOV travel from about 45.8% in 2021 to 44% in 2022. That's a reduction of about 1.8. So we weighed this reduction against our original trendline projection from the previous slide to estimate a more gradual reduction in year-over-year non-SOV travel. And that brings us to a new estimate and target of 42.6% non-SOV travel, which is highlighted on the screen in blue. And this adjusted 4-year target represents sort of a balance between pre- and post-pandemic trends and the expectation that non-SOV travel will continue to increase across the Boston urbanized area, but at a more gradual rate than what we experienced during the pandemic years. Okay, so I'm going to do the same spiel, but this time for Worcester. Moving left to right, you can see some of the trends pre-pandemic starting in 2016 and then post-pandemic in 2022. Again, this follows pretty closely to the Boston urbanized area in that the driving alone rate dropped, public transportation dropped a little bit, and then the work from home is really where an increase happened here, moving from about 4.5% in 2016 to nearly 14% in 2022. Again, this is a look back at the old target and trend line we developed 2 years ago. So we created this projection by finding the rate of change between 2014 and 2019, and we found a 2-year target estimate of 25.35% and a 4-year target estimate of 26.12%. And again, we excluded data from the year 2020 because we didn't want that jump in the first year of the pandemic to have too much of an impact on this projection. So this is the latest trend line using the latest available data, using the methodology that we applied 2 years ago when developing this target. And as you can see, that last number in the blue line is what the latest available data shows us, that we are at about 28.95% for a rate of non-SOV travel in the Worcester UZA, exceeding both the 2 and the 4-year target we established 2 years ago. Again, this is good, but we know that the pandemic had a big impact here, and this cannot be attributed to behavioral changes in travel patterns alone. So we thought it would be unwise to use a pure trendline projection here to set the next target. So we had to get a little bit creative to find a target estimate that was sort of balancing pre- and post-pandemic trends. Okay, so we performed a similar exercise to what we did in Boston. Let me make sure I have my notes up here so I'm not mixing up our estimates. So again, we found the 1 year rate of change between 21 and 2022, and then applied that to our trend line that we saw on the previous page. The non-SOV travel rate changed from 21, where it was about 31.76%, to 2022, where it was about 31.23%. That's a reduction of about 0.53. So we weighed that reduction against our original trendline projection from the previous slide to estimate a more gradual year-over-year reduction to bring us to a new 4-year target of 29.64%. That's highlighted there in blue on the screen. And again, this was an attempt to find a balance between trends both before and after the start of the pandemic. So we expect non-SB travel will continue to increase in terms of 5-year estimates across the UZA, but at a much more gradual rate than what we saw during the pandemic. But it's the same thing for Springfield, but that's not part of here.
Chris,
so.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to mention that we do not have Springfield UZA as part of the region.
Yep. So if you want, Brian, you can go to the last slide. I think that's just a summary table laying out the baseline data against our original 2 and 4 year targets. One more. Yep. So you can see the baseline figure that we had at the time of our original target setting 2 years ago, our original targets, and then the mid performance value in blue and the adjusted 4-year target in green. There's a lot of information. I hope it wasn't too quick or overwhelming. I'm happy to take questions, and at this time we'll look for your support in adopting the new 4-year targets for both the Boston and the Worcester urbanized area.
All right. Anyone have any questions for Chris? Grace?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, there's a lot there to absorb. I want to sort of take my time and go over it again, but I have a couple of specific questions. So, are like Lyft, Uber, share rides, are those included in your taxi numbers? Is that where those are being?
Yes, they are. Yes.
Okay. And then the other question is sort of multimodal. People who maybe like drive 10 miles to get to the commuter rail, and then they're doing a single occupancy vehicle and then hopping on a public transportation. Is that population accounted for anywhere in this data? Just
So
multimodal.
Sure, that's a really good question. So this data is captured from surveys developed by the U.S. Census Bureau. So I can look back into that data set to see the particular language in the question that they ask. I think it's regarding the main commuting method. So if they travel just a couple of miles to go to a park and ride or commuter rail station, for example, and then the majority of their trip is done on the commuter rail, then they would have been prompted to mark commuter rail as their commute method. But I can go to that data set, and I'm happy to share a link so we can dig into it.
Well, I'm curious, probably because for my own work, but also struggling with the data, which obviously I feel like it's still settling out with post-pandemic stuff. There's talk of more return to work, so numbers feel very shaky to me in general. But I'm sort of struggling with a lot of this data set myself, and I'm wondering when does the 23 data come out?
The year prior data comes out at the end of the following calendar year. So we're hoping that 2023 data is available on June 1st of 2025.
And so the hope is that over the next year, you'll be able to update with these projections and all that. Is that the?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So we re-examine all the metrics in PM2 and PM3 every 2 years. So not this following year, but the year after that, we'll have both 2023 and 2024 data available. So we can take another look at these metrics and come back to the MPO with the same or a similar presentation and update.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. That was really nice.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Anyone else have any questions?
And if I may just add some additional context. So this group adopted the original targets. So what the proposal is today is to adjust the single occupancy vehicle targets based on the information from Chris's presentation. So which staff does recommend doing.
All right, thank you for that, Brian. Anyone want to make a motion second to do what Brian just detailed?
Yeah, I make a motion to accept it as presented.
I'll second, Ann Sullivan.
All right, any last questions for Chris? All right, seeing none, Brian, you want to read the roll?
Steve Wolfo, Mass DOT.
Yes.
Ian Sullivan, Mass DOT Highway.
Yes.
Mark Piamarini, Leominster.
Yes.
Glenn Eaton, MRPC.
Yes.
George Kahali, Mart.
Yes.
And Tim Kilhart, Subregion 3.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Chris. Brian, I think we're going to move to the next agenda item, which I believe is agenda item 5, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Talking about MPO Subregional Representative Caucus. I assume you're going to talk about it, Brian?
Yep, and this is an item I wanted on here. I did expect additional attendance today. This is really in relation to the subregions. And I mentioned this at the last few meetings. I just wanted to give a heads up. We're in the process of planning a subregional representative caucus, basically where the members of the subregions will get together and determine who will be the representative going forward. Haven't had this in a number of years. Clearly, there's a need. Our intent is to boost participation in this group in general, but specifically within the subregions. We have a few subregion reps that attend pretty much every meeting, and it's great. We get quorums, but we need to go through the process again, sort of re-engage some of the subregions and basically meet face to face. So the thought is to meet at our offices in Leominster sometime after the holidays, January or February. And again, our intent is to get as much attendance and involvement as possible, re-engage people, get together in person. If it's night, we'll have some food. We'll go over the process, a little bit about the MPO. Hopefully we get some new faces. And we're in the process of sort of organizing a date for this, and we'll send out invites and information in the coming month or so. I was going to ask if there's any feedback today on what might be an ideal time or day of the week for this type of thing. I know it's difficult. A lot of these subregions are representative by members of the Board of Selectmen or the Planning Board. They're not necessarily always professionals employed by the town that are able to make daytime meetings. There may be certain days of the week to avoid because of Board of Selectmen meetings, what have you. What our initial discussions were was it might be ideal to have it on a Monday night, possibly. And obviously, it would be on us as staff to really prod people to send people to this. A lot of outreach will go into it. And again, the intent is to re-engage people and get some more representation from the subregions. With that being said, look out for invites in the future. And if there's any feedback that you think would be helpful to us before we solidify a date or a time, that would be great.
All right, anyone have any questions for Brian on that? I don't see any questions, Brian, so please, everyone, stay tuned for that engagement opportunity that's coming up. They'll be important. We will now move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 6, which are updates. The first one is from Vision. So D3, why don't you go first?
Or I'm also covering for D2. Daryl
All right.
couldn't make it.
Take it away, Ann.
Yep. So the first one is Leominster Route 12. That's an AC that was advertised last year. So the remaining funds for the project are on 25. Harvard Air Road, project 609213. That is at 75%. The 100% are due this month. And right of way will likely be tight on that project. I think we all know. Hubbardston, Williamsville Road over the Burnshirt River, 609187. That project is at 100%. The PSNE is due in the middle of December. Still needs the right-of-way cert and environmental permitting. Sterling, stormwater drainage improvements at Wachusett Reservoir on Route 110. That's project 610659. That is at PSNE. It needs some environmental permitting and we'll need a license from DCR for the right-of-way. Gardner, Elm Street, resurfacing sidewalk improvements. That's a Safe Routes to School project. That's project 610672. That is at PSNE, and they are just working on the right-of-way. The Fitchburg-Leominster Twin City Rail Trail is AC this year. On part of the funding is on the 2025 tip. That was advertised last year. Ashburnham, Route 101. Oh, that's it. I'm into the next year. So that's 2025. That's it for me. Did I freeze?
No, Steve's on mute.
Okay.
You're right, I'm on mute. Any questions for Ann? All right, seeing none. Mister. We'll move on to the next update, which is from Mart. George, you got anything?
Yes, I do have a couple things. Mart just received a couple grant. First one for Mart to run a shuttle between Westminster and Gardner called Connector Shuttle in the amount of 144,000 to expand our services for elderly and people with disability and low income individuals in our region. And the other one, another grant for the regional rural connector intercity loop northwest service in the amount of $124,375 to serve the community of Ashby, Ashburnham, Winchendon, and Templeton. Mart already start working on putting together schedules to run a couple shuttles in Gardner and Westminster for November. We'll be running these shuttle serving these communities, and the other shuttle will be serving Ashburnham, Winchendon to Gardner to bring the resident to the hospital and to the schools and shopping centers. This is what I have. Thank you.
All right, any questions for George? All right, thank you, George. The next update is from the JTC. Brian, we got anything?
Yeah, just that we met as a JTC last week. There was no official business conducted. It's still the slow time of year. The next meeting is scheduled for December. We opted to skip November unless there's any compelling reason to meet. Next meeting would be December 11th at 2:30 remotely. I also have a few handouts I'd like to quickly go over. The first is related to a survey in an effort for a joint effort between MRPC, Central Mass Regional Planning, and Worcester and Northeast Connecticut Council of Governments on a comprehensive climate action plan that they're putting together. There's a survey link in the handout and also links about the climate pollution reduction grant that this is all being done with and the action plan itself. One other handout I have is on regional coordinating councils. Basically, this is a forum which a number of different stakeholders regularly meet. to discuss and understand different challenges to different populations in the region and try to work to get some solutions and different mobility options for these populations, such as people with disabilities, low income, and older adults. It goes beyond just Regional Transit Authority, but also includes other entities such as human service organizations, could be major employers, state agencies, definitely healthcare providers, etc. Previously there was an RCC in the Montachusett region. Met regularly from about 2012 through 2019. This was organized by the RTA, by MART at that time. More or less, it is disbanded due to a number of reasons, mainly related to the pandemic at that time. I don't think there was a reason to meet for a long time, and it's kind of disbanded since then. Recently, we've been working with the Health Equity Partnership of North Central Massachusetts, also known as Chennai 9. You might remember some presentation on the future of mobility that we did in June with that group. Those meetings have been ongoing over the last year or so. And through that, it's apparent that revamping and reestablishing an RCC for the Montachusett region would be beneficial. As I mentioned, we've been discussing the logistics of this, revamping this group with Chennai 9, and ultimately we decided to apply for a grant to get this effort off the ground. With that in mind, this is an informational type of flyer. That's what we've been working on. I'd like to bring this up again under administrative matters because it does relate to the next GTC meeting and when we would like to have that. So that is all I have for now.
All right. Any questions for Brian? All right. Well, the last updates from the Regional Planning Commission. Glenn, you got anything?
Yeah, sorry, I always struggle with the mute button and go to meeting. My apologies. Just very briefly, we're in a transition. Our fiscal director is retiring. We have an internal review policy. We're reviewing an internal candidate, and we'll make a decision at the commissioners' meeting on November 7th. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Any questions for Glenn? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda. Chris, you got a question?
Sorry, Steve, might have been premature. Not a question, just another update from MassDOT. But I can
Oh yeah, I forgot, Chris. Go ahead.
Thanks. So I just want to let folks know that MassDOT is in the process of finalizing update to its agency-wide public participation plan. We shared the latest draft with our federal partners and received feedback on that last week. So we're working to respond to those comments internally, and we're hoping to turn around a draft for public review before the end of the month, which will be accompanied by a brief survey asking folks about their experience engaging with MassDOT and participating in public events. We'll definitely lean on our regional planning partners to make sure those two documents are available to as many people as possible during the public review period. So please stay tuned and keep an eye out for those once they're ready. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions for Chris? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 7, administrative matters. So take it away, Brian.
Okay, so as I mentioned when I was speaking about the Regional Coordinating Council, the reason why I wanted to bring this up under administrative matters is that MPO staff, in collaboration with Chennai 9, are in the process of applying for a grant to get this effort off the ground. We'd like the MPO to endorse a letter of support for the grant. The grant application is due on November 1st. We did not have the foresight to put this on the agenda for the meeting, so in respect of open meeting laws, we won't ask for a formal vote to endorse a letter of support. However, we would like to push up our November meeting to possibly October 30th to allow us to provide this letter of support for the grant and take care of our November business in October. We have a number of different items that we'll be voting on at this next meeting. I think that we can basically take care of it all, and that would negate the need for a November meeting. However, I will follow up with the group if we do choose to have our next meeting October 30th and make sure the process goes smoothly. So we would recommend as a staff to hold our next MPO meeting October 30th, same format. It's a Wednesday at 1 o'clock remotely.
All right. What do members think? Is that okay to coincide with what Brian asked? And I think, Brian, we said that we wouldn't meet in later in November, correct? It would just be this next meeting on October 30th.
Right, assuming that we can take, there's a number of agenda items that official business related to tip amendments, a few different items that we'd like to take care of. Hopefully, we can take care of this in October, skip November, come back in December, and take care of everything on time.
So in general, members okay coming back on the 30th, knowing that we still may have a November meeting?
Yep.
All right, so it sounds like no one is saying no. So with that, why don't we plan on having the 30th, and then we'll be back in touch. Hopefully, Brian, that we can make a decision on whether we need the meeting on the later in November before. So I think what we should do is have people put in October 30th in their calendar, and then we'll follow up with more information whether or not we'll need the double meeting or not. But hopefully we'll have more clarity by the time the 30th rolls around. Does that work for everybody? All right. So it looks like that's what we're doing.
Could I just add one more thing? And thank you all for coming today. And I'll make sure to do the appropriate amount of outreach to make sure that we have a quorum on the 30th. Thank you all for being here. It's really helpful. We just made quorum today, so definitely appreciate if people could make it if they can on the 30th. I'll send out the information next week.
All right. With that, just to underscore what Brian says, we definitely need folks to be here to take up these items. So please try to make sure it's on your calendar. With that, can I get a motion second to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, Mark Pimmery.
All right. Everyone in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
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 All right. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy. I might see you, Arlene. Bye, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you.